So it was July 23rd, the year was 2002. 9 miners in western Pennsylvania became trapped in a flooded mine. The injured and desperate men tied themselves together so that the stronger ones could sustain the weaker ones as they waited to be rescued. Journalists from around the country reported on the rescue, which took 5 long days. And no one could believe it when all 9 miners emerged safely from the mine. On July 30th, the people of the small mining community gathered for a worship service to thank God for saving the miners' lives. At the ceremony, there were 10 miners' lamps set up on the altar, even though there were only 9 miners. According to the pastor who presided over the worship celebration, the 10th lamp represented God's presence, which the miners claimed they felt as they waited to be rescued. It was this 10th man they honored as they read Psalm 103. It's a wonderful passage. It says, "Praise the Lord who redeems your life from the pit." Very appropriate. Welcome to this celebration of our 10th man, the one who has rescued us from the pit. Today we focus on another central reason for Advent, and that is God's revelation. God revealed both God's character and God's dream for humanity in the person of Jesus Christ. Now, if we only picture Jesus as a tiny baby in Bethlehem, we will never get at the true heart of Christmas. Christmas can only be understood as a part of the total Christ event: Jesus' birth, his life, his teachings, his death on the cross, his resurrection from the dead, his continuing presence through the power of the Holy Spirit, and his final reign at the end of time. You see, it's a package deal. It all goes together. Now that sounds awfully theological, doesn't it? I mean, who wants to talk theology at Christmas time? It's a shame that church keeps trying to horn in on Christmas, isn't it? I mean, it's a shame we keep trying to make Christmas into some kind of a religious holiday. You know, why can't we just be satisfied with Jingle Bells and Frosty the Snowman? I mean, you know, I personally like Jingle Bells and Frosty the Snowman, but they say more about winter than they do about Christmas. And then, of course, only for those people who live in parts of the world where there's snow. Can you imagine a kid in Miami singing, "I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas"? Well, there is white sand, I suppose, but let's get real here. Jesus is the reason for the season, no matter how unpolitically correct that might be. You take the Christ child out of the manger and all that he represents, and we might as well shut the doors and go home. And that's not only true of the church, but it's true of the long-term future of humanity. In the prologue to his gospel, John writes, "There came a man sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light." The light John witnessed to, of course, was Christ. The most important thing about Christmas is that Jesus Christ has come into our world. Christ coming into our world shows us that God truly cares about people. God cares about people. You know, it's wonderful to contemplate the heavens and to ponder the grandeur and the majesty of God. It's really more than the mind can take in. The heavens tell us of the glory of God. Very few people in our society seriously doubt the existence of God. But God is not only grand, God is also holy. Study God's creation, and you will conclude very quickly that God is a God of orderliness and lawfulness. No problem there. The question is, does this almighty, all-powerful, all-righteous God really care about us? Do our problems and concerns matter to the divine Creator? And the answer of Advent and Christmas is a resounding yes. God cares more than we can possibly imagine. There's a wonderful story about a couple some years ago that had a terrible argument. The author called them simply Mary and Joseph, Mary and Joseph Smith. It started when Joseph came home from a long day at work. He was tired and hungry. He stuck his nose in the refrigerator. He immediately noticed a strange and unpleasant smell. It bothered him, and he commented on the smell. And that led to another comment about the general condition of the kitchen, which led to another comment about the state of the bathrooms. And then came Mary's response about the empty gas tank in the family car, and the messy garage, and that the dryer was still broken. And of course, as though on cue, the checkbook seemed to walk into the argument like the angel of death himself. Mary felt defensive, and she was justified in that feeling. She'd been working hard too, feeding the kids, taking them to their lessons and basketball games, clothing them, getting them to bed. At some point, the husband blurts out, "Oh yeah, right, here we go again. It's always about you, isn't it, Mary? Whenever I have the last comment, it always comes back to you." Well, you know what, Mary? Sometimes it's not about you. Sometimes it's about the world, Mary. Sometimes it's about the world, like war and the AIDS epidemic and Africa and the melting polar ice caps. By the time our kids are our age, this house will be underwater. For goodness sakes, Mary, it's not all about the refrigerator stinking or the checkbook or the garage. Or above all, it's not about you. It's not about you, Mary. At this point, says the author of the story, that Joseph got the look from Mary. Yeah, it was a kind of a squint, as though even to look at Joseph required a kind of painful, straining effort from her eyes. The look told Joseph many things. He had seen it before. But mainly it told him the truth of his condition, that he was indeed pathetic, that he had no hope of getting out of this argument with any shred of dignity. And so he shrank, having lost his appetite, having lost all attempt to pull out of the emotional dead end that he was in. So things kind of fizzled out from there until they found each other in the same room. She was sighing and leafing through a magazine, and he sat silently in front of the blue light of the TV watching Law and Order. Yeah. They went to bed wordless and exhausted. Well, at least one of them went to bed. The other one grabbed a pillow and a blanket and ended up on the couch. The last words ringing in both their ears were, "It's not about you, Mary. It's not about you." Following day, the mail came. And in the midst of the pile of bills and magazines was a large catalog that had a computer-generated flyer on the cover that read in bright, large capital letters, "Mary Smith, in fact, it is all about you." It didn't matter what the catalog was selling, whether it was a daytimer, personal organizer, or kitchen supplies or lingerie. Mary never had to open the cover, and certainly Joseph didn't. Everything they needed was on the cover. A reminder, a message, in fact. It's all about you. It's all about you. And because they loved each other and needed each other and honored one another, despite the stench that still came from the refrigerator, they paused, they stopped, they laughed, they held each other and started again. Christmas says to us that it is all about us. It's about God's love for us. God's willingness even to die for us. The God of all creation, the righteous God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, this God who created everything that exists with a simple word, loved us so much that he was willing to die on a cross like a common thief. And it was all about us. This is the reason for the season. The reason is the coming of Christ into the world. There came a man who was sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light, but he came as a witness to the light. Light has come into our world in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. The 10th man has come down into the pit of our darkness to deliver us from hopelessness and despair. So what is the proper response to the coming of this marvelous light? First of all, it is to open ourselves up to receive that light, to receive the light. Pastor Earl Palmer of First Presbyterian Church of Berkeley tells about Rembrandt's painting called The Adoration of the Shepherds. This is Rembrandt's interpretation of the visit of the shepherds to the babe in Bethlehem. It's a simple scene, a stable. In the foreground are the mother and child, with Joseph in the shadows in the background. Peering into the manger where the baby is lying are the shepherds, with their sheep scattered around them. They couldn't leave them out in the field, so they had to bring their shepherds along with them. Arching above the manger, the artist Rembrandt has painted a ladder, which suggests in the shadows it casts the form of a cross. Now, Rembrandt was too good an artist to just put a cross in it without any justification in terms of the setting, the original setting of the picture itself. But the ladder subtly suggests it. And although it's difficult to see, on the beam against which the ladder rests is a rooster, the symbol of betrayal. Rembrandt here is suggesting that it is by the means of the crushing inner agony of betrayal and the outer agony of crucifixion that the one in the manger would become the world's deliverer and redeemer. But the striking thing about the picture is that the light illuminating the whole scene, is not coming from outside, but from the manger where the baby is lying. There is no halo over the baby, such as medieval painters often employed, but the light which illuminates the faces looking in is streaming from the manger. Their faces are put into sharp relief as they look down, and you can see that the light itself is coming from the Christ child. This is Rembrandt's remarkable way of saying that the story of Christmas is the story of light in darkness. The light of Christ has come into our world. Why? To eliminate the darkness. You and I have places in our hearts and lives, dark places, that only Christ can illuminate. We need to open ourselves to that loving gift, that love represented by the babe of Bethlehem. And secondly, we need in our own lives to bear witness to the light that we ourselves have received. That's what we're told at baptism, in fact. And why is that? Well, so that someday everybody may walk in the light and there will be no darkness at all. There's a wonderful story about Dr. Oswald Golter. Dr. Golter was a missionary to China more than 60 years ago, and at the end of World War II, he was asked to leave that country. So his missionary society wired him a ticket, and Dr. Golter made his way to India to catch a ship home to America. While he was there, he noticed that there were many Jews living in the area, in attics and sheds and barns, garages, whatever. They were there because India was one of the few countries in the world that welcomed the Jews following the war. And Dr. Golter was excited to see them and went around and greeted them. It was Christmas time, and he said to them, "Merry Christmas to you, Merry Christmas." And they all said, "We're Jews." "Well, I know," said Dr. Golter, "but Merry Christmas anyway." "I tell you," they responded, "we're Jews. We don't mark Christmas." "I know," he said, I know. But if you did, what would you want for Christmas?" "Well, if we did," they replied, "we would probably want some of those fine German pastries." Fine German pastries. So Dr. Golter found a shop that sold fine German pastries. He cashed in his ticket home, and he bought boxes and boxes of pastry. And he took it back with him to the barns and the attics and the sheds, and he handed it out to the Jews, saying, "Merry Christmas to you." That story was told in the presence of Dr. Golter years later at a seminary where he was invited to speak. As he got up to the microphone, a young seminarian stood up and said to Dr. Golter, "I can't believe you did that. Those people aren't Christians. They don't even believe in Jesus." And Dr. Golter nodded his head and said, "I know." And then he added, "But I do." I do. Light has come into our world in the person of Jesus Christ. And you have that light. You have that light. And our job now is to go from this place and to bear witness to that light in everything you do until a day comes when the light of Christ will light up the entire world. Thanks for watching. I hope this video can further the discussion of your relationship with Christ, either at home or maybe in the comments below.